Connie's hosting a talent contest to find the best characters in the Dreamiverse. But she's a no-nonsense judge, and none of these candidates are up to scratch. Of course, Cuthbert's no use, so let's see if we can come up with something to impress her. Head into the dressing room, also known as edit mode, to get started. In this tutorial, we'll be customizing the appearance of a puppet. So we'll need a blank canvas to start. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Gadgets menu. Now open the Gameplay Gear menu. In here, find the Blank Puppet Deluxe. The Deluxe version is the perfect starting point for making characters. Select it with X and a blue mannequin will appear on your imp. It has built-in features like jump and possession animations, which the basic version doesn't have. Connie won't be impressed by a basic puppet, so make sure you select the right one. Stamp the deluxe puppet in the scene with R2 or X. Get its feet roughly on the floor, but make sure they aren't intersecting with it. Then press the circle button to unequip the puppet from your imp. If you need to, you can grab and adjust the puppet with R2. In the next step, we'll start exploring the puppet's inner workings. The puppet might look simple, but it's quite a complex gadget. So let's get to know it a little better. It's made up of many objects that have been grouped together. And just like any other group, it can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. It can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. If they're obscured by the floor, you may need to scope out and adjust your puppet's position. The puppet's body is made of sculptures, joined together with connectors. When scoped in, we can grab parts of the puppet to change its pose. Before we do that, find the button called Puppet Mirror in the context menu. Select this button with X, and your puppet will stay symmetrical when you pose it. Of course, you don't have to make it symmetrical, but it's a good way to start. You can always add nuance later. When you move a part of the puppet, all the parts connected to it will also move. The root of the puppet is the pelvis, and every other part is connected in a hierarchy from there. For example, moving the upper arm will move the lower arm and the hand as well. But if you move the pelvis, the whole puppet will move. Its feet will try to stay in contact with the floor. So if you lower the pelvis, the puppet's knees will bend. You can also rotate parts by grabbing them with L2. Use R2 and L2 to create a new pose for the puppet. Changing the pose can be a great starting point for a character. The pose could be confident, sad, scared, or aggressive. Don't forget, you can undo any changes with the left directional button if you make a mistake. Use the grab cam to adjust your pose from different angles. Just hold R1 over the puppet to activate it. When you've finished posing your puppet, move on to the next step. Now we've posed our puppet, we can start adjusting its proportions. To do that, we're going to use the stretch tool. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The stretch tool. Now we've posed our puppet, we can start adjusting its proportions. To do that, we're going to use the stretch tool. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The stretch tool works like the move tool in a lot of ways. But with the stretch tool, you can move parts of the puppet beyond the limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Notice the way the neck elongates and shortens. Now try it on the hands. This changes the length of the upper and lower arm. Some body parts respond differently to the stretch tool. For instance, if you move the upper arms, the shoulders will broaden and the chest will expand. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons. I'd only recommend doing this to the puppet's extremities though, the head, hands and feet. Puppets are delicate contraptions, and extreme scaling and stretching can make them behave unexpectedly. But if anything does go skew-whiff, just undo it using the left directional button. If you know how to use sculpt mode, you could try scoping into the individual body parts to change their shape. You can find a whole tutorial on sculpting in the art tutorials. Have a play around with stretching and scaling and see what you can create. Try making the puppet more cartoony or turn it into a monster. Test out your puppet in play mode to see it in motion. When you're done, return to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. In the next step, I'll show you how to color and stylize your puppet. Another way of customizing your puppet's appearance is by changing its color. We can do this by tinting it in coat mode. If you've played my tutorial on coat, style and effects, you'll already know how to do this. In the assembly menu, go to the modes menu and enter coat mode. In the coat mode menu, open the colors menu and select a color for your puppet. Now hover over your puppet and hold R2 to tint it with your selected color. In the assembly menu, go to the modes menu and enter coat mode. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the grid snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the assembly menu and open the guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that grid snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string though, it's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that. So let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. Time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the connectors section in the assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared. 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial.
That is a big bridge. How is Connie gonna get that down? Doesn't look like Cuthbert will be able to help. Maybe the imp can do something about it. In edit mode, the imp can grab and move anything. But for the imp to move the bridge in play mode, it needs to be made movable. When an object is movable, it means it can be moved by forces in the scene. Forces like gravity or collisions or your imp. You might already know how to make an object movable, but don't worry if not, because it's pretty simple. Tweak the bridge with L1 and square, then go to the physical properties page. Find the button with the seesaw icon and select it with X to make the bridge movable. Easy as that. While we're here, there's another setting we need to tweak. To move an object, the imp has to grab it first. By default, objects in play mode can't be grabbed. So let's change that. Near the bottom of the tweak menu, you'll find the settings for imp interaction. These options determine how the imp interacts with the sculpture in play mode. Hover over the buttons to see their names. This button will let the imp grab the sculpture. It's the button with the hand icon. Select it with X, then close the tweak menu, using L1 and the circle button. I think now would be a good time to test the scene. Switch over to play mode and use your imp to pull down the bridge. Well, that was pretty easy, but don't get too comfy. I've got something a bit more complicated in store on the next platform. When you're ready to move on, switch back to edit mode and start the next step. The second obstacle has a simple objective. Get the ball into the pipe. On the side of the pipe, there's a microchip. On the microchip canvas, there's a trigger zone and a timeline. Select the trigger zone with X, and you'll see the zone is inside the pipe. Trigger zones detect possessed puppets, so it won't be activated by the ball. But they can be tweaked to look for other things, like tags. If we attach a tag to the ball, we can tweak the trigger zone to detect it. Go to the assembly menu and select Gadgets. The tag lives in sensors and input, and its icon is a gift tag in a crosshair. The second obstacle has a simple objective. Get the ball into the pipe. On the side of the pipe, there's a microchip. On the microchip canvas, there's a trigger zone and a timeline. Select the trigger zone with X, and you'll see the zone is inside the pipe. Trigger zones detect possessed puppets, so it won't be activated by the ball. But they can be tweaked to look for other things, like tags. If we attach a tag to the ball, we can tweak the trigger zone to detect it. Go to the Assembly menu and select Gadgets. The tag lives in Sensors and Input, and its icon is a gift tag in a crosshair. Tags are really simple gadgets that can be detected by other gadgets. Select the tag with X. To attach the tag to the ball, we can use Surface Snap. You might need to get a bit closer to the ball. With the tag on your imp, hold L1 to activate Surface Snap. Keep L1 held, otherwise Surface Snap will stop working. Hover over the ball and press R2 to attach the tag. Press circle to unequip the tag. Grab and move the ball to check the tag's attached. Looks good. In the next step, I'll show you how to make the trigger zone detect tags. So, let's tweak our trigger zone to detect the tag we've created. Fly over to the trigger zone on the pipe. Tweak the trigger zone with L1 and square. In the Tweak menu, look for Things to Detect. The default setting for this is Possessed Controller Set. Tweak the trigger zone with L1 and square. In the Tweak menu, look for Things to Detect. The default setting for this is Possessed Controller Sensors. Controller sensors are the gadgets that allow us to possess puppets, like Connie. Next to that is Tag. You should recognise the icon from the Tag gadget. Select this icon with X, and the trigger zone will detect tags instead of possessed controller sensors. The Tag gadget on the ball will flash to show that it's being detected by the zone. Trigger zones can also look for named tags. You can rename any gadget just by selecting the name in its Tweak menu. By using named tags, you can make trigger zones detect something really specific. You can close the Tweak menu now. Jump back into play mode and have a go at putting the ball in the pipe. The ball is already movable and grabbable, so your imp can interact with it in play mode. We have to depossess Connie in order to use the imp. But even when depossessed, our view is still oriented around Connie, making it difficult to interact with the scene. We can solve this by adding a camera. Return to edit mode and move on to the next step. If we add a camera to the scene, we can fix the point of view. This should make it easier to interact with the puzzle. Cameras are gadgets, just like the trigger zone or the tag. So go to the Assembly menu and select Gadgets. The camera is found in Cameras and Lighting. Its icon is an old-fashioned movie camera. Select it with X. Stamp a camera in the scene, then press circle to unequip it. Place it so it's looking towards the pipe, but not too close to it, as we'll need the platforms in view too. You can see exactly what the camera sees by editing it. Hover your imp over the camera, then hold L1 and press X. Now you're looking through the lens of the camera. When editing a camera, using the left and right sticks will move its position. If the camera's a bit wonky, just push up or down on the left stick and it'll automatically level itself. Very useful. Frame the shot so that the platforms are either side of the frame, with the pipe in the middle. That way, we can see where Connie is, and also where she needs to go. Once the shot is perfectly framed, hold L1 and press circle to exit the camera. On the side of the platform to the left, you'll find another trigger zone. This detects the cone character, or Connie, as we like to call her. Select it with X, and you'll see it covers the whole gap. Connecting this trigger zone to this detect. Once the shot is perfectly framed, hold L1 and press circle to exit the camera. On the side of the platform to the left, you'll find another trigger zone. This detects the cone character, or Connie, as we like to call her. Select it with X, and you'll see it covers the whole gap. Connecting this trigger zone to the camera ensures that the camera only activates when Connie gets to this stage of the scene. Deselect the trigger zone, and you'll see it covers the whole gap. Connecting this trigger zone to the camera ensures that the camera only activates when Connie gets to this stage of the scene. Deselect the trigger zone with circle, then create a wire from its detected output. Now connect the wire to the power port on the camera. Once you've set up the camera, you can start the next step. Like all gadgets, cameras can be tweaked with L1 and the square button. Let's take a look. This first slider controls the focus distance. As well as setting the focus, this value also controls how close to the camera the imp will appear. At 1.6 meters, the imp will look the same as it does in edit mode. By increasing focus distance, we can make the imp appear over the pipe and platforms. This will make it easier to interact with the puzzle. The zone in front of the camera shows its field of view and its focus distance. Hover over the front of the zone and grab it with R2 to extend the focus distance with your imp. If you grab the little ball gizmo in the middle of the zone, you can edit the focus distance and the camera's direction. Use the centre of the pipe as a guide for where the focus distance should be. Now switch over to play mode to see how the imp's appearance has changed. The imp now looks a lot smaller because it's further from the camera. A special skill of the imp is that it can grab objects no matter how far away they are. Try it with the ball. Even though it's further back in the scene, the imp can still grab it. As well as being able to move within the frame, the imp can also move in depth using the left stick, but it can only do this while grabbing an object. If you drop the ball, the imp will return back to the focus distance. The distance the imp can move in depth is controlled by the camera gadget. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak the distance. Switch back to edit mode and rewind with L3. Creating gameplay is all about tweaking things until they feel right. Open the camera tweak menu if it isn't already open. Select the tab with the imp icon to switch pages. These settings control how the imp appears in the camera. Find the sliders for min and max imp distance. These control how close and how far the imp can move in relation to the camera. With the min imp distance slider, we can stop the imp from moving closer to the screen. Pull the min imp distance slider up to the maximum. The min imp distance can't be set higher than the focus distance. With the max imp distance slider, we can prevent the imp from moving further away. Drag the slider to the minimum, and you'll see it can't go lower than the focus distance. As the imp and the pipe are aligned, we don't need to be able to move the imp in depth. That's all we need to do. If you want to know more about the other buttons and sliders in the tweak menu, just hover over them for a few seconds to reveal their more info tooltips. Now close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. There's one last puzzle for your imp to solve. Fill the tank with water so Connie can use the float to get across. But at the moment, the button to fill the tank is broken. First, we need to make it so the imp can grab it. Tweak the button and square. Make sure you tweak the button and not the microchip. Imp interactions are on the physical properties page of the tweak menu, remember? Set the imp interaction to grab. Another benefit of being able to grab the button is that we can use a grab sensor. This simple gadget detects when an imp has grabbed an object, allowing us to use it to trigger other gadgets. So now we need to do a little bit of logic. The logic for the button is all contained in this microchip. Open the microchip canvas with L1 and X. Some of the logic is already set up, but it's not much use without a grab sensor. Go to the Assembly menu and select Gadgets. Open Sensors and Input and find the grab sensor. Its icon is a hand. The grab sensor needs to be attached to a grabbable object in order to work. But because the microchip is already surface snapped to the button, any gadgets on the microchip canvas will act like they're surface snapped too. So we can stamp a grab sensor straight onto the microchip. In the next step, we'll connect the grab sensor to the rest of the logic. There's one last puzzle for your imp to solve. Fill the tank with water. Take a look at the output. To finish setting up the grab sensor, it needs... Emitters are all about making something appear from nothing, as if by magic. Looks like Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of them yet. You can emit all sorts of things: platforms, scenery, enemies, effects. One of the simplest ways to use an emitter is to launch a projectile, which is exactly what Connie needs to hit this target. Next to Connie, there's a button with a trigger zone gadget on it. We're going to set up an emitter to launch the orange at the target, then use this trigger zone to activate it. Let's start by getting an emitter gadget from the Gadgets menu. Go to the Assembly menu, then select Gadgets with X. Now open the Movers and Outputs menu and look for the emitter. The icon is an arrow and 3 circles. Select the emitter with X, but don't stamp it just yet. We're going to attach the emitter to this fruit launcher using Surface Snap. To Surface Snap gadgets, just hold L1 while holding a gadget. Surface Snap. Select the emitter with X, but don't stamp it just yet. We're going to attach the emitter to this fruit launcher using Surface Snap. To Surface Snap gadgets, just hold L1 while holding a gadget. Keep L1 held, then hover over the base of the fruit launcher. The gadget hugs the surface. Press R2 or X to attach the gadget. Once that's done, release L1 and then press the circle button to drop the gadget. It's not essential to surface snap emitters, but it'll come in handy later on. In the next step, we'll give the emitter something to... To make the emitter work, we'll need to give it a reference object. The emitter will then make a copy of that object that can be emitted in a variety of ways. Hover over the gadget, hold L1, then press square. Move the tweak menu to the side so you can still see the emitter gadget. When the tweak menu is open, a positional gizmo will be visible on the emitter. This is where the object will emit from. So let's give it something to emit. In the tweak menu, look for the button with the crosshair icon. This button is used to pick something in the scene to be the reference object for the emitter. Hover over the button, then press X. The button will start flashing. Now the tip of your imp will be tethered to the button by a dashed line. When you hover over an object that can be emitted, the line will change colour. Note that most of the objects in this scene have been frozen and can't be emitted. Hover over the orange, then press X to connect it to the emitter. This flashing orange is a copy of the one we just linked to the tweak menu. The original is still in the scene, but it's been hidden. I'll show you how to unhide it later. The positional gizmo has moved to the centre of the orange, and an arrow gizmo has appeared. The arrow shows the direction of the emitted object. Grab the arrow gizmo with R2 and move it so that it's pointing at the target. Angle the arrow upwards slightly so that the orange doesn't collide with the edge of the launcher. Use the grab cam, R1, to check the gizmo's position from different angles. Now click R3 to test the emitter. Well, the emitter is working, but it'll need more power if it's going to hit the target. Click L3 to rewind time. I'll show you how to give it some oomph in the next step. To make the emitted oranges travel farther, we need to increase the emit speed. Find the slider with the speedometer icon. Move the slider with X to adjust the value. If you set the speed to 0, the object will just appear at the positional gizmo. This is useful for spawning enemies or emitting static scenery objects. It's not much use for a projectile though, so bump up the speed to around 10 meters per second. Now click R3 to start time. That's more like it. Use the arrow gizmo to aim the orange at the bullseye. Once it's on target, click L3 to rewind time. Now the emitter is on target, we can finish tweaking it. Find the option called Emit Mode. There's two options here, once and continuous. At the moment, the emitter is continuously emitting oranges at 1 second intervals. The time between the emissions can be changed using this slider. But if we change the emit mode to once, only one orange will be emitted each time the emitter is activated. Click R3 again, and this time only one orange is emitted. Click L3 to rewind time and close the tweak menu. Then start the next step when you're ready. For Connie to activate the emitter, we need to wire it up to the button. On the side of the trigger zone, there's an output port called Detected. This will activate when Connie enters the zone on the button. Press X over the port to create a wire, then drag the wire over to the emitter. Connect the wire to the power port with R2 or X. Now the launcher will only fire when Connie jumps on the button. Now take a look at the target. See that green gadget on it? That's an impact sensor. If Connie can hit the target with the orange, the impact sensor will detect it and trigger some logic to raise the first bridge. Well, it will once we turn it on. Tweak the impact sensor with L1 and square. At the bottom of the menu, there's a power button. Select it with X to turn it on, then close the tweak menu. Right, let's try this out in play mode. Menu, there's a power button. Select it with X to turn it on, then close the tweak menu. Right, let's try this out in play mode. Bullseye! The bridge has raised. Connie must be feeling fruity today. The next target is activated by a watermelon. Instead of setting up another emitter from scratch, let's try cloning the emitter gadget from the first platform. Move your view so you can see the first two platforms. Hold L1 and grab the emitter gadget to clone it. Make sure you only clone the gadget and not the whole launcher. Once you've made the clone, release L1 and move the new emitter over to the second platform. Now hold L1 again to surface snap it to the watermelon's fruit launcher. Then release R2 to place it. Click R3 to test it. The cloned emitter isn't connected to the trigger zone yet, so it activates immediately. And of course it's emitting the wrong object, so some tweaking is in order. Click L3 to rewind time, then open the tweak menu of the cloned emitter. To remove the orange from the emitter, just hover over the Object to Emit tweak and press triangle. This will reset the button. Pressing triangle over any tweak menu slider or button resets it to its default state. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. Before we connect the watermelon to the emitter, how about we give it some juice? Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Date. Just hover over the Object to Emit tweak and press triangle. This will reset the button. Pressing triangle over any tweak menu slider or button resets it to its default state. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. 8. Just hover over the Object to Emit tweak and press triangle. This will reset the button. Pressing triangle over any tweak menu slider or button resets it to its default state. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. Before we connect the watermelon to the emitter, how about we give it some juice? Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Another great way to use emitters is to emit effects. See that gadget on the watermelon? That's a microchip. It contains some logic. To open the microchip, hover over it, hold L1, then press X. It's just like scoping in. This is a simple logic circuit. If you hover over the output ports and follow the wires, you can see what the logic is doing. When the watermelon bumps into something, that event switches on the destroyer. Hover over it, hold L1, then press X. It's just like scoping in. This is a simple logic circuit. If you hover over the output ports and follow the wires, you can see what the logic is doing. When the watermelon bumps into something, that event switches on the destroyer. Then, as soon as the watermelon is destroyed, the emitter is activated. But it isn't set up to emit anything yet. We'll use this emitter to emit a splat effect. There's a ready-made fruit splat effect for you to use in the tutorial collection. Go to the Assembly menu, then select the Search button. Enter the collection and find the fruit splat effect. Select it with X. Stamp the fruit splat next to the watermelon then press circle to unequip it. It doesn't look like, then press... Enter the collection and find the fruit splat effect. Select it with X. Stamp the fruit splat next to the watermelon, then press circle to unequip it. It doesn't look like much at the moment, but if you click R3... Now that's a proper splat. The splat is a simple animated painting. You can learn more about animated paintings by playing the painting tutorial. Look for it in the art tutorials. Now click L3 to rewind time. In the next step, I'll show you how to emit the splat effect. To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the microchip. Select the Object to Emit button with X. Drag the dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. The splat should come from the middle of the watermelon, so use the positional gizmo to position the emitter. Use the grab cam to check the position of the gizmo from different angles. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. And as this is a one-time effect, set the emit mode to once. And that should do it. Close any tweak menus and microchips with L1 and circle. The watermelon is now ready to be emitted from the launcher. Because the microchip is attached to the watermelon, it'll also be copied by the emitter, along with all the logic inside. Check the position of the gizmo from different angles. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. And as this is a one-time effect, set the emit mode to once. And that should do it. Close any tweak menus and microchips with L1 and circle. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. Check the position of the gizmo. Dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. The splat should come from the middle of the watermelon, so use the positional gizmo to position the dash. To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the microchip. Select the Object to Emit button with X. To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the microchip. Select the Object to Emit button with X. Drag the dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. The splat should come from the middle of the watermelon, so use the positional gizmo to dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. Check the position of the gizmo from different angles. Check the position, dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with... To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the microchip. Select the Object to Emit button with X. Drag the dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. The splat should come from the middle of the watermelon, so use the positional gizmo to position the emitter. Use the grab cam to check the position of the gizmo from different angles. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. And as this is a one-time effect, set the emit mode to once. And that should do it. Close any tweak menus and microchips with L1 and circle. The watermelon is now ready to be emitted from the launcher. Connie must be feeling fruity today, setting up another emitter from scratch. The view so you can see the first. Once you've made the clone, release L1 and move the new emitter over to the second platform. Now hold L1 again to surface snap it to the watermelon's fruit launcher, then release R2 to place it. Click R3 to test it. The cloned emitter isn't connected to the trigger zone yet, so it activates immediately. And of course it's emitting the wrong object, so some tweaking is in order. Click L3 to rewind time, then open the tweak menu of the cloned emitter. To remove the orange from the emitter, just hover over the Object to Emit tweak and press triangle. This will reset the button. Pressing triangle over any tweak menu slider or button resets it to its default state. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. Before we connect the watermelon to the emitter, how about we give it some juice? Start the next step when you're ready to continue. To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the microchip. Select the Object to Emit button with X. Drag the dashed line over to the splat, then connect it with X. The splat should come from the middle of the watermelon, so use the positional gizmo to position the emitter. Use the grab cam to check the position of the gizmo from different angles. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. And as this is a one-time effect, set the emit mode to once. And that should do it. Close any tweak menus and microchips with L1 and circle. The watermelon is now ready to be emitted from the launcher. Because the microchip is attached to the watermelon, it'll also be copied by the emitter, along with all the logic inside. See if you can connect the watermelon to the emitter. It's just like the way we connected the orange on the first platform. And don't forget to connect the trigger zone so that Connie can activate it. If you get stuck or need help setting up the emitter, just move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's connect our juicy fruit to the launcher's emitter. If you manage to do it yourself, then you can skip to the next step. Hover over the emitter gadget, then hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Select the Object to Emit button with X, then stretch the dashed line over to the watermelon. Press X over it to link it to the emitter. This target is a bit farther than the first one, so adjust the emit speed and the trajectory of the emitter so the watermelon can reach it. Another great way to use emit the watermelon, hover over it, hold L1, emit anything, made fruit splat effect, then press circle to unequip it. Now that's a prop. You can learn more about animated paintings by playing the painting tutorial. Look for it in the art tutorials. Now click L3 to rewind time. In the next step, I'll show you how to emit the splat effect. To emit the splat from the watermelon, we need to tweak the emitter in the micro dashed line over to the check the position of the gizmo from different angles. The effect already has animation, so the emit speed should be set to 0. And as this is a one-time effect, set the emit mode to once. And that should do it. Close any tweak menus and microchips with L1 and circle. The watermelon is now ready to be emitted from the launcher. Because the microchip is attached to the watermelon, it'll also be copied by the emitter, along with all the logic inside. See if you can connect the watermelon to the emitter. It's just like the way we connected the orange on the first platform. And don't forget to connect the trigger zone so that Connie can activate it. If you get stuck or need... So let's connect our juicy fruit to the launcher's emitter. If you manage to do it yourself, then you can... Any ideas why the watermelon wasn't triggering the target? Take a closer look at the target. See that gadget snapped to it? From its icon, we can tell it's a trigger zone. Ah, but if we hover over it, we can see that it's been named Detect Tag. If you open its tweak menu, you'll see that in the Things to Detect section, the Tag button is selected. Naming gadgets and logic really help used to trigger logic. Only problem is, the original watermelon vanished when we connected it to the emitter. Even if we open the tweak menu, we can't tweak or scope into the watermelon because this is the emitter's copy, not the original object. But there's a way to get around this without unlinking the watermelon from the emitter. Go to the assembly menu, then select Show Hide. This menu has a bunch of options for showing or hiding various different things in the scene. In Show Hide, look for the closed eye icon. This button is Preview Invisibility, and by default, it's switched on. If you deselect it with X, all the invisible objects in the scene will become visible, and you'll also be able to interact with them. If you still have the emitter tweak menu open, you'll be able to see the original watermelon and the copy. Grab the watermelon and move it to one side, and you'll be able to see them both. The flashing watermelon with the arrow gizmo is the emitter copy. In the last step, we turned off preview invisibility in the scene. Oh wow, look at Connie. With preview invisibility turned off, we can see all her special effects. Don't get distracted by all that though. We've got work to do. Now that the original watermelon is visible again, we can tweak and edit it. Use L1 and X to open the microchip on the watermelon. Because this microchip is surface snapped to the watermelon, it will also be copied by the emitter. By adding a tag to the microchip, the emitted watermelons will be able to activate the target. Go to the assembly menu and select Gadgets. In Sensors and Input, look for the tag. Once you've equipped the tag, hover over the microchip and it will automatically snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp a tag anywhere on the microchip canvas. Now press Circle to unequip the tag, then hold L1 and press Circle to close the microchip. We can turn preview invisibility back on now. Go back to the Show Hide menu and select the closed eye icon. Now give it a try in play mode. It worked! Go back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. We've made it to the final challenge. The final bridge is already raised, but there's a huge block in the way. If you look closer at the block, you'll see another microchip gadget attached to it. Open it up with L1 and X. Ah, this logic looks similar to what we saw in the watermelon's microchip. We have an impact sensor connected to a destroyer that triggers an emitter. If we fire one of our fruit launchers at the block, it'll clear the way for Connie. But first, let's add an awesome destruction effect to the block using the emitter. When the block is destroyed, we'll emit the tutorial collection. We just need to connect the broken block to the Object to Emit tweak. Open the tweak menu of the emitter in the microchip. Select Objects to Emit with X, then stretch the dashed line over to the broken block. Press X to connect the broken block to the emitter. In the final step, we'll tweak the emitter to finish the effect. To make the destruction effect look convincing, we need to line up the blocks exactly. To get it exact, we'll enable the Grid Snap guide. Doesn't matter if you do, as invisible objects can't be seen in play mode. Line up the emitted broken block as closely as you can to the one on the bridge. Press triangle while grabbing the block to realign it to the grid. On and then grab them to create clones. Because all the gadgets are surface snapped, we can clone the logic, the watermelon and the splat effect all in one go. Move the clones over to the to go and try out the completed scene. Take Connie into the elevator to complete the tutorial.
Howdy, partner.
Cuthbert's always wanted to be a star, so I've cast him and Connie in a drama set in the wild west of the Dreamiverse. But this scene needs a director, and I thought you would be the perfect person for the job.
We're gonna use cameras and text gadgets to tell the story of how Deputy Connie apprehended Cuthbert the candy thief.
But you won't get far without a camera, so I better show you where to get one. Open the assembly menu with the square button, then select Gadgets. Close any open sub-menus with circle, then open the cameras and lighting section. Find the camera. The icon is an old-fashioned movie camera. Select it with X. This camera is going to capture our opening shot. See how the gadget has a little camera gizmo attached to it? Point it roughly at Connie, then stamp one with R2 or X. Once you've stamped one, unequip the gadget by pressing circle. Before we look at the framing, there's a few things we can tweak on the camera that'll help us achieve a cinematic look. Hover your imp over the camera, then open its tweak menu with L1 and square. The transition type settings let you change how cameras activate. By choosing different curves and adjusting the transition time slider, you can blend cameras together. But for a dramatic scene like this one, we'll be using the cut transition. It's the button with the scissors icon. The cut transition is instant, so there's no need to set a time for the transition. Below the transitions is the field of view slider. The wider the field of view, the more you'll be able to see with the camera. You can leave it set to its default value for now, but you might want to make adjustments later. Finally, we're going to turn on black bars. It's the button at the bottom. This will put a letterbox on the camera to give it a widescreen look. Move on to the next step, and we'll look at framing the camera. Right, let's frame the shot properly. Cameras only activate in play mode and test mode. But we can preview and edit the framing with a simple shortcut. Hover over the camera gadget, then hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping in. We're now looking through the lens of the camera. But not just looking, we can also edit the camera's position just by using the normal movement controls. If your camera's a little wonky, it's no problem. It'll automatically level itself out if you move it with the left or right sticks. Isn't that clever? Position the camera with Connie and Cuthbert at either side of the frame for their confrontation. Here's another tip for editing cameras. You can use the up and down directional buttons to change the field of view. And you can still use the tweak menu while editing the camera, so you can see the effect of the changes you make. Once your shot is perfectly framed, use the shortcut L1 and circle to exit the camera. We've set the scene. Now it's time for the drama to play out. Move on to the next step when you're ready to start telling the story. The simplest way to show text on screen is to use a text displayer. Open the assembly menu and go to Gadgets. In the Movers and Outputs section, you'll find a handful of gadgets for displaying text and numbers. The icon